Present Katie Dugan.
Present Chris Peisch.
Francine Lyons, present.
Corey Evans, present.
Susan Franklin, present. Okay, we have a lot to cover today, so I think we're gonna just jump right in.
Yeah, let's go ahead and promote. I think in attendees, we've got Craig, Ralph is in there too.
He's coming in now.
Yeah,
Everyone's a panelist today.
okay.
And you're a panelist, and you're a panelist.
There we go. It might make sense to make Sue and Sarah co-hosts in case they want to share something from their screens.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry for the link. It worked and yet it didn't work, depending on how you attempted to use it.
That's okay.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, so welcome. Do you want to just do Sarah introductions quickly for everybody? We'll jump right in.
Yeah, we've got, I'm a new member and so is Chris Peisch. So the rest of the faces are, been on capital budget for a while, but just a quick introduction would be great.
So I'm Sarah Shannon. I'm the superintendent of schools.
I am Susan Owen. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations.
Craig McClellan, I'm school committee member.
Great, welcome. We're looking forward to hearing your requests.
Thank you. Katie, I guess my question would be, do you want me to share my screen so everybody can see the memos that we've shared, or did people have them?
So we have them all in our OneDrive. I'll put it out to the group. What's more helpful? Do you want the memos up while Sarah and Shannon just walk us through an overview of each of the requests? Or would you rather just have it in panelist view, putting that out to the capital budget members?
Probably easier if someone's sharing,
Okay.
so we're all looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
So share my
Let's start with we're going to start with some of the reoccurring first, and so if we can start with the furniture request, like that would be great.
Sure. Okay. So I'm gonna share my screen. Is that big enough, or I can make it a little bit bigger too?
I think my eyes could use a little bit bigger. Thank you.
Mine too. Okay. So I'll start with the furniture request. We have been the beneficiaries of some capital funding with regard to furniture over the last couple of years, and that funding has gone to support updated furniture at the Deer Hill School. This request continues that funding request of around $35,000. But this time we're actually looking to improve some furniture both at the middle school and at the high school. We have lots of areas in all of our schools that are in need, but we have recognized that these are two of our most high priority areas, given the age, condition, and use of some of that furniture. Again, we're grateful that we were able to upgrade all 18 classrooms at the Deer Hill. We have two spots. One is the Babane conference room at the high school. This is it is the conference room at the middle school, high school. It is the only conference room that is able to be used. All of our other spaces are used for other purposes. And the furniture in there is over 20 years old. Some pieces are damaged and worn out. And this is the place where we have a lot of our parent meetings, especially our meetings for students who are on IEPs or 504s, or whenever we need to have a meeting that is, more sensitive in nature, maybe around discipline. And so this is a place where we want people to feel comfortable and welcomed because they're emotional meetings. And so we're looking to create a space that is a welcoming environment with updated furniture and that allows for more people to be seated in a comfortable way. Right now, we're often having to use these folding metal chairs to accommodate additional folks at a meeting. Sometimes at some of our more in-depth meetings, we may have a series of teachers, we may have sets of parents, we may have outside counselors or outside agencies with us, and that can be a lot of people. So we have to accommodate with these metal chairs. The table and chairs are old, they're a little bit cracked. And so looking to have something that looks more presentable and nicer. And some of this furniture is furniture that's been there for over 20 years old.
Yep.
In our counseling offices at the middle school, our counselors have been making do with what they can find, literally. They have found furniture that they are covering that is stained. I know you can't see all of this quite well. They're picking up furniture because we're trying to create comfortable environments where these are our students who are, they are for counseling, for therapeutic purposes, so it needs to be comfortable. They often have groups. And so having some seating that students feel like is comfy. We also have tables that are definitely broken, and desks that aren't working anymore either. You can see that things have come off. And so we're looking to update these spaces because they help just our overall environment and our community and culture. The combined cost for both of these is $35,672. Individually, the middle school counseling offices would be $20,283, and the high school Babane conference room would be $15,389. And so any questions about this one? And I can stop sharing while we do questions, maybe.
I guess the question I had was, when we had originally met with you, there were more needs. There are always more needs, but this is the first request for the middle high school. Looking forward, as you sort of think through this programmatically, is this a couple more years of reoccurring is going to get you through the middle high school? It's a larger building, obviously, in Deer Hill. I'm just trying to sort of structure my mind forward looking just a little bit if you've got it.
Yeah, I think it would be for a few years. I think what I would recommend is, when we finish our strategic plan, we'll know more about what we're looking to do in terms of creating educational experiences for students. And in some of those cases, furniture helps create those educational experiences. So I would rely on that strategic plan to help us identify what our priority areas are for the future at the middle school and the high school. And then, yes, it is a much larger building in general. I also think that it's important to note that as we think about any potential new facility, that any furniture that we would would ideally be furniture that we could bring with us as well to a new building.
Okay. That this isn't something that would get torn down. It would just be portable, packed up and shipped
Yeah.
to the next new space. Got it.
Exactly.
Okay. And just because I'm new to the committee and maybe you don't have this history, but has Osgood been taken care of? I can't remember whether Osgood furniture was done. I can actually look that up myself, but just.
Sue, do you know?
I don't think so in its entirety. We may have, purchase furniture, as needed as we go, but never as a reoccurring item on capital.
Okay.
Katie, it just depends. It just depends. Some of it's in great shape. Some of it is aging, along the lines of the photos you just saw.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
again, but the strategic plan that you're doing encompasses the whole district, so that would sort of get rolled into what Sarah was already talking about in terms of those educational places and communities you're trying to create, whether it's middle high school or Osgood or elsewhere. Okay.
I mean, I seem to recall, yeah, the Deer Hill furniture was Susan and Francine looking at you too. We had done that previous years in the past, and I thought that last year was kind of the end of that cycle for furniture. Sue, you're nodding your head. Is that how you recalled as well? Okay.
Yes,
Francine, okay, cool.
the only thing I would like to add is, the last area was gonna be the main office at the Deer Hill. But we
Oh.
thought these 2 conference rooms were a priority, so we pulled Deer Hill's main office off the list.
Gotcha. Okay,
In
thank
the
you.
teacher's lounge, right? Susan,
Yes.
in Deer Hill?
Yes. Yes,
Okay. Gotcha.
Thank you very
So
much. Yeah.
that gets thrown in the mix of forward-looking needs. Okay. All right. I don't have any other questions do other people on the committee have questions to be answered on this one?
Not particularly because these are unique rooms in front of them. They don't match up with like a prior program, so. I just
Yeah.
assume this is on the state, you're getting this off the state bid list or? Mhm.
yes.
Yeah, I don't have any questions either on this request.
I don't either.
Okay. Then maybe we move on to interactive whiteboards as our next topic. Again, one that we've talked about before.
Yeah, and for Chris and Katie, this is year 3 or 4 of migrating all the schools from kind of these funky projectors to these whiteboards. There was a pilot program years ago at Osgood, and these are it's been a program to try to get the entire school over to these. So this is we're in the back 9 of that project right now.
I think it's this is the 3rd phase.
Okay.
And so, not to repeat what Corey has shared, just to move forward from that. So year 3 was supposed to be to outfit the Deer Hill with the interactive whiteboards. Year 4 was to outfit Osgood. And after some conversation with principals and staff, the decision was made to actually do half of Deer Hill and half of Osgood in year 3, and then the other half of both of those schools in year 4. Both school principals have a rollout plan to identify which teachers would receive the interactive whiteboards in year 3. Some of that is based on the projectors that are going to fail first, and some of the oldest projectors, and some of it will be based on usage, and which teachers are sort of chomping at the bit to get their hands on these new interactive whiteboards. Because right now, while both schools have projectors, they are just projectors. So they project onto a static whiteboard. And so what we are looking to do is outfit them with these interactive whiteboards. And so the teachers and students can actually utilize these new interactive boards as though they're whiteboards in many ways. They can go up, they can write on them, they can actually take notes on them, save it, upload it to their computers, share it with students, things like that they are not able to do currently. We are excited about this opportunity because it allows the teachers to just do so much more. And many of the projectors that are in the building were installed in either 2013 and 2014. A few have been replaced in 2018 as well. So they are reaching the end of their useful life. And the cost of those projector bulbs is also pricey. And so we are at a point where it makes more sense to actually give the teachers the more updated technology rather than continuing to try and fix these failing projectors. So it really enhances the learning experience for our students and the teaching experience for our educators. And again, this is year 3. The cost of this total request would be $117,628. The cost in year 4 would be similar because this is half. And then after year 4, this request would be complete.
Do you have any historical information on what these cost in previous years? I was just doing the cost per unit. Is this in line with or higher? I couldn't find my notes on this. Does anyone have that handy? Okay. I thought we're about $10,000 a piece, and we're in, or 80. I don't remember, whatever, but
I don't know.
Just trying to get-
Last year we spent 225,000 at CHS.
yeah, I don't have a whiteboard count for that. I can't.
Yeah, the year before there were 28 smart panels for 128,000.
Oh, Ralph, do you have it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers were like 4,500, 4,600, depending on whether or not you had trolleys associated with them or whether they were hung. Those were the numbers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
4,000. Okay. So
Roughly
are these?
Sometimes a little bit more when you had a trolley. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm looking at the quote from last year. I think they were the 65-inch ones, is that correct?
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so 63.50 for the one with the cart, and if it's not on a cart, it was 47.35. So good memory, Ralph.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, and this time around, it looks like we are.
If I was following the map that you guys provided, it looked like what you had highlighted were the rooms that were going to, over the 2-year period, see replacements in. So at Deer Hill, looked like there were 25 rooms that were going to get new interactive whiteboards, and at Osgood, looked like there were 26. So in total, 51 over 2 years, with 26 being requested for this year.
Yes, because the highlighted ones, because there are more rooms labeled, and so the highlighted ones are the ones.
Yeah.
Yes.
It looks like, yeah, these are also the larger 70 some odd inch ones, right? Looks like.
Yes, 75-inch.
Yeah.
But it's hard to tell what the total package per is, just because there's a lot of parts, as Ralph alluded to, that sort of bundle up into one unit. But yes.
Yeah, I just did like you know, the 59 612 28 for the Deer Hill ones divided by the 12 and the 13. Yeah.
Well, if you take the 117,628 divided by 26 units, it gets you to 4,500.
Gotcha. All right, so these are actually coming a little bit lower. Great.
Yeah.
So did you guys say these are the 75-inch ones this year?
That's
'Cause
I see
we
in the
did do this.
proposal.
That's in the quote, yeah.
Okay. The 65s were circled on the memo from last year, so now I'm not sure which ones we went with, but
In the OneDrive, there was a proposal.
Yeah, I think it says
Mhm.
12 classrooms with 75-inch wall mounted and 1 classroom with a 75-inch mobile.
Yeah.
And
For
that's
Deer
it. That's at
Yeah.
Deer Hill.
Yeah, and the other one was all 13 for wall mounted, yeah. For Oscar.
So, yeah, but my question was just, did we go up from the 65 to the 75s from last year?
I don't know what ended up being purchased for last year. Sue, do
Oh,
you?
we had a
I
mix
think
of
it was
them
a
last year.
mixture. I think it was a mixture. based
Okay.
on wall space. Some classrooms didn't have enough room for the bigger ones.
Portion of the records we have for 25 aren't, especially the request doesn't list. Anyway, our cost per unit is equal or lower to what we've had in the past for this program. So, you know, it makes sense that 75 would be as expensive as 60 was. It just seems to be what TVs are doing.
I was literally watching a digital display today at a Dunkin' Donuts while I was waiting. I'm like, I was saying to my son, I'm like, 15 years ago, there's no way we would have been watching like a Frappuccino like being poured in front of us.
Right.
Like Dunkin's would not have been paying for that flat screen. That's just the cost of flat screens plummeting.
I don't know if they had Frappuccinos 15 years ago.
Well, that too.
Can I raise a question, Susan, if you allow me? I have read a number of articles which are showing up fairly frequently now about the efficacy of these kinds of screens, especially for children in the lower grades, and whether or not the amount of screen time the kids are exposed to is really overall a good thing. And although I don't think we should do anything about our present plans, I really wonder whether we shouldn't ask ourselves, how well are we really doing having these kinds of screens? And do we really want to have a huge amount of screen time associated with these screens, Chromebooks, and the kids, whatever they're doing at home with computer games and their cell phones, whether we really are doing the right thing by our children anymore, particularly for young children? And so I raised that question. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I'm just saying these are serious questions that will come up over time as we find out whether or not there are long-term impacts of UV light coming from these devices, which is really true, and looking at them constantly day in and day out for everybody. I know you can't answer it directly, but I think it is important to ask those questions.
So I actually think those are great questions and that we're actually asking those questions ourselves. I think these interactive boards are important because it allows us to display to the whole class, but we are thinking really hard about what, especially at the younger levels, level of interaction with the individual devices should be. I think we are seeing more and more teachers go back to sort of written work at times as opposed to being on Chromebooks because we're seeing the value of getting kids off of screens. So I think it's actually an excellent question. As we also looked at the book Anxious Generation over the summer and into the start of the school year and thinking about how do we have students like truly interacting with one another as opposed to a screen is another component of that as well. So it's something we're wrestling with. I don't know that we have an exact answer, but I will tell you we're talking about it.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate that.
I don't have any more further questions on this one.
I don't either.
I'm good.
What's that?
And I think we said this before, Craig, Sue, and Sarah, that tonight we're really in listening mode, and there's no big thumbs up or thumbs down that's going to happen. We have to make it through a couple more town departments and have some conversations with the select board. So there may be follow-up questions that we invite you back for, but again, tonight isn't like there's going to be a big vote. So if we're speeding through, it's because we understand what we're looking at. So. How about we do roads and sidewalks next? This, in my mind, is a little bit of a program that was reoccurring for a period of time in 2018, 19, and 20. There were reoccurring roads and sidewalks requests, but then COVID happened. A lot of stuff happened, and now the schools are revisiting it as something that needs to have some sustained focus over multiple years. So I will put this in a Back to the Future in terms of a reoccurring project that hasn't happened in a while, but we should think about it as a reoccurring type just because of the overall size and probably the magnitude of the request. So I'll leave it at that. I'll let you, Sarah, introduce sort of what the program looks like as you've envisioned it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Katie. I think that captures well sort of what the conversation has been. And when we looked at the road and sidewalk request, the conversation started with Nick Berardi around all of the things that we needed to do, and there's a long list. And so we asked him to prioritize some of the needs. And this is our prioritized list, but it would be something that we would request on a regular basis each year so that we can address some of the other concerns that are around. We are at a place where some of this infrastructure is continuing to age and deteriorate, and each year it doesn't get addressed, it deteriorates more. So we're really looking at some of the asphalt and sidewalks that are creating some safety risks, including injuries to students, staff, and visitors. You'll see, and I have some photos below, but these are the 4 that we're really prioritizing this year. So the asphalt road and sidewalk between Deer Hill and the Osgood to be resurfaced. Asphalt road from Pond Street needing to be resurfaced. Replacing the sidewalk and curbing on the entry road to the middle school, high school, and extending the sidewalk to Pond Street. I think the photos are a little bit better in explaining those things. So that walk between Deer Hill and Osgood, there are spots where there are cracks, it is uneven. And this is an area where we have our littlest kiddos who are walking that. They, come from before school rise and they walk down to Deer Hill, or they're walking between for a variety of reasons. So looking to have those surfaces resurfaced. This, I believe, has been a continued request. So Pond Street is down here, coming up the drive, and then you hit the sidewalk. We would request that the sidewalk continue all the way down to the sidewalk that is on Main Street. Because the kids are walking down here all the time. Every morning I come in, I see the kids walking on the grass, trying to get up to the school, having crossed over as walkers. And then finally, the roadway or second to last, the roadway to the entrance to the middle school and high school. I would say even since this photo was taken, some of this looks a little bit more deteriorated as we've had some snow and ice. And these are our main entrances for the majority of people who are coming to visit the district. We also have students who are crossing over a lot here. They cross over from the parking lot over to the field. And so it just becomes dangerous. We also have a lot of older folks who are trying to walk up here as they're coming to different games, because you have to walk up to the gym area for a lot of them from that parking lot. And so this is really what we're looking at in terms of also the sidewalk at the middle school and the high school. And here's just another photo of the road coming up to the athletic complex. We do have, it's well traveled, not just by car, but by pedestrian. And so our goal is to resurface them so that they are safer, first and foremost, but also that they look better. Trying to put our best foot forward, literally and figuratively.
So Sarah, would you go back to the first slide, the Deer Hill School?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, so in thinking about this project, I've always felt like there's just people just pull up their cars on the curbs because there's no place to park their cars, and that's part of the deterioration of the curbs. So when you guys talked about this with Nick, was that discussed as maybe trying to find a way to resolve some of those issues?
We did not have that conversation, but I certainly could have that conversation because I think that's a valid point. And so how would we prevent people from continuing to try and pull up onto that sidewalk would be important.
Well,
Well,
that's,
yeah,
that's
I
one
don't
way of
think you can
looking
stop
at it, but
it.
yeah, I was thinking more if, you know, we know that Osgood is, Deer Hill and Osgood are schools that we want to continue to maintain and move forward with. And so if we're going to make changes to the roadways there, it may be an opportunity to rectify some of the problems by maybe widening the road.
So happy to have that conversation as well. I think that in my conversations with Nick, it was, while that would be a great option, he was trying to focus more on what could potentially be doable. And break it down into small pieces, but I do hear that point that maybe if we were gonna look to do this project, because even the sidewalk, the roadway I drove down there today and there's like a huge pothole there. But if we were gonna address it, how do we really address it and solve the bigger problem? Even if it costs more to look at it as a whole project.
Yeah, I just think it would just be worth looking into and asking the question.
Yeah, I can do that.
We may not be able to do it, but it's always good to know, like,
Yeah.
if we could do something that solves a more longer term, what we know is a longer term problem, and maybe we address it at the same time.
Well, and this is not a new conversation, right? And in addition to Nick, you really need to connect with me and Brian Joyce too, because we've had this with sidewalks on all over town, right?
Mhm.
And to repair a sidewalk, as has been explained to me, or as I understand it, when you repair it, you still have the water ingress problem because there was a crack and you're patching it, and it doesn't really last a long time. So if you're going to do, and it costs a lot of money, so there's a preference to get in somewhere and do it all at once, right? So the conversation about is this it's the Deer Hill, Osgood, that whole area, at what point is it worthwhile to rethink the whole area, redo the whole area at once, and figure out again, understanding that's going to be a bigger cost item. Is there a different way to pay for that, or can we combine funds in multiple places to get a larger project done that solves, to Susan's point, parking issues, because there's never enough parking there. People driving up on the curb because you drop on the curb because otherwise the bus can't get through, right? It's totally natural to get up on the curb. I sit in that line almost every day. So and then on the other side, right, the other side of the road is also basically a flooded mess, but that's because people are parking there all the time as well. So there's multiple things that's causing this, and I do think that the larger conversation, it would be more expensive, but I think you will get more for our more bang for our buck at that point by fixing everything at once and really getting to the root of the problems.
I think when the field study was done, was there not a bigger project envisioned for the Deer Hill Osgood? It may have included fields, it may have included parking for buses, because when I met with Brian Joyce about DPW, he referenced a much larger number for
Right.
Deer Hill Osgood, but it was a much more involved project. But I'm just, to your point, is there knowledge from that previous study in terms of like what a better plan looked like that we could maybe resize?
I mean, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of that was, I think a lot of big ideas that were kind of being tossed around without a whole lot of next step 2 and step 3. So what you're referencing, I think, were kind of the big ideas, what's possible, not necessarily a tighter look at fixing the parking issue specifically. Craig, do you
Okay.
think that's
You
a
were-
fair?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Are you referring to, though, when there was discussion about having the buses sit there off to the side?
Yeah, there was a plan to have the
Yeah.
buses
Yeah.
there in between the buildings. There's a plan to add another
Fields.
field. There's a
Yeah,
a
that's-
bunch of stuff, and there were a lot of cool concepts with a lot of varying price tags, but none of them were just parking lot repairs and improvements for
Mhm.
capacity. I don't believe that was ever one that was fully fleshed out. But that's something that I'm, you know, in previous conversations has been brought up by Brian as, you know, we're getting close to the point where that whole area needs to be redone. And so we may be hitting the tipping point where, you know, if patching it is going to be about the same amount of money as redoing the whole thing, or, you know, again, your cost per square foot is, you know, no longer makes it worth it.
Susan, your point about making a bigger, more permanent investment at Deer Hill Osgood makes sense to me versus just a resurfacing conversation at the middle high school, given that we don't know the extent that that building is going to be transformed. So that resonates quite a bit with me. In terms of prioritization, there's 4 projects here. Sarah, Craig, Sue, have you guys talked about how these sort of rank order a little bit?
You know,
We might each have our own perspective.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a consensus, but I think that, like, we were just talking about it, you know, not too long ago. I mean, I think that the sidewalk to nowhere to me is a priority. I don't know why that doesn't connect.
That was
To the
been around
sidewalk.
forever. Yeah.
That's 20 feet away. It's always been like that. I don't know if it's because the quote unquote maple swamp that exists there, but
Mhm.
that should exist. I mean, that sidewalk should connect to the Pond Street sidewalk system. But I mean, so if I had to pick one, that would be my priority project.
I mean,
Sarah,
that's also kind of a separate thing versus the other, you know, where it's patching asphalt, right? That's its own kind of separate piece. You know, kind of stands on its own as a project.
okay.
and I would probably agree with Katie in that, you know, the hope is that by next year we'll know if, and maybe that we will have been accepted into the MSBA process. So if I had to look at this year, I would rather have a broader conversation about Deer Hill and Osgood, because we know that's gonna not really change in the future.
Just a quick comment for everyone. We have obviously discussed the sidewalk to nowhere
Yeah.
a great many times over maybe 2 or 3 years or more.
Mhm.
It is more involved than you think. It's not just the environmental issue. It's in fact that when you put a curb in, you're also dealing with the road. So you really are talking about not just that sidewalk. You really have to deal with the road itself where you put a curb in. So it's a much more expensive project than it appears to be for those 2 reasons, environmental and the rebuilding of the road itself. So be aware of some of the concern that's occurred in the past years as to why that's a tough project to take on.
Why don't we invite Brian Joyce in here in a follow-up meeting to discuss, because he'd be the one that has to implement and build it. So, because I mean, Katie referenced conservation issues. We've obviously got, you know, logistical issues. So it probably makes sense for us to understand, to be sure that we fully can digest the project, and have Brian's kind of thoughts on it too in the meeting.
A good thought.
The other
Yeah.
question I would raise, Katie, if I could, is
Yeah.
can we designate where we think the funds might come from? In other words, are we talking about road and sidewalk? Are we talking about school funds? Are we talking about capital budget funds? I mean, be specific about where we are, what we think is the right place for this.
Well, thank you for teeing that up, Ralph. There's 3 potential places that could be funding. Obviously, the capital stabilization, but then it's always battling against everything else that we've got in that $2 million pot. There is the Roads and Sidewalks Stabilization Fund, which has $900,000 of funding every year, the 800 plus whatever we get in Chapter 90. The Sidewalk Committee, along with the town, makes selections, and they voted in December for their selections for fiscal 26 funding, so that 900,000 has already gotten calls against all of the capital for this coming year. So that I don't think is an option for this year. when Ralph and I met with Brian Joyce in a DPW conversation, he did mention that the Roads and Sidewalks Stabilization Fund and that committee have taken a quote unquote policy decision that it is town, not school related roads and sidewalks. And so we have, if we wanted to entertain a conversation about incorporating the 4 projects, it would be a policy conversation. And I'm not sure whether that would start with select board or it would start with the, Roads and Sidewalks Committee. So again, there is theoretically capital there, but at least for fiscal 26, that's already been designated, and we'd have to have the policy conversation. The third option is the School Stabilization Fund, which, if we all remember, we had a balance of 2.6 million. In October, we allocated the fire alarm and the Joseph Osgood design for the roof. So we now have a balance of $1 million plus the 1.5 million refresher coming. We've got $2.6 million in that fund as of annual town meeting. We're going to obviously hold a portion of that aside for a big portion aside of that for Osgood roof. We won't know that bill probably until late summer, early fall next year. So there is a potential to use some of that. But again, I think it would have to be a conversation about making sure we have more than enough coverage for Osgood and that bill coming due. So I think there are 3 options, but in my mind, the most viable, at least for fiscal 26, is to carve some money out of the School Stabilization Fund. But we have to do that carefully, knowing that we have to guarantee that we have money for the MASB capital call when it comes.
Yeah, and I would also, I know the policy decision was made, but I think it would be appropriate to challenge the select board on that kind of the wall there, just because, to Sarah's point earlier, I think if you just look at number of cars per square of asphalt road, we're not talking about North or South Main Street here. When it comes to the roads that are left to be done in town, at a certain point, the amount of cars that are traveling over Osgood, Cohasset Middle High School, like these are still town people. So I'm not suggesting by any means that we ignore the town roads, but I do think that it's appropriate to balance the school roads as they are still roads in towns, because if we're putting them up against fire alarms or putting them up against fire trucks, they're obviously going to lose. But if we're going to talk about them in relation to other smaller roads that have less traffic, I think it's appropriate to get them prioritized differently. So I myself have had that conversation behind the scenes, but with select board members, and I'll continue to do so because I do think that there needs to be a flexibility there to be sure that we're getting stuff done in the right order.
Do you disagree that for fiscal 26, it's probably a done deal? Because I don't.
No,
see
you're completely correct. Yeah, this is going forward. My apologies.
We're unringing. We can't unring a bell, I don't think, for fiscal 26, but we can challenge it for future years. But if there's stuff that the schools want to get done in this current cycle, I think the most likely source of funds would be school stabilization.
Or capital stabilization. Right.
Or capital stabilization, but capital stabilization would mean bumping another project.
Yeah. And the sidewalks, the ones that I believe that they went through this year have been in the works for a while. So they're certainly, I think for FY26, they've done a good job prioritizing.
And I think I just want to say that I guess 2 things. One is if we wanted to look at the School Stabilization Fund, that we would need to bring the school facility committee into that conversation as well. But also, as I think about like the roads or the parking, all the, to the high school, middle high school and the Osgood Deer Hill, and thinking about the amount of town activities that happened in our buildings off school. I mean, every youth sport is traveling onto these roads. And so it is far more than just the schools that are using those facilities.
Yeah. Again, the town versus school designation, it never sits 100% with me. You know, like the funds have to be divided, and yet we're all one community, and we often all travel the same roads. Okay. So in terms of next steps on this one, what I'm hearing are a couple things. One, Michelle, if you're there, teeing up Brian Joyce to come and talk to us about
I got that.
the 4 projects, but in particular, the sidewalk to nowhere conversation. Sarah, I think I would throw back in your court the sort of the re-envisioning the Deer Hill Osgood a little bit beyond just resurfacing what you've got to making a investment in those 2 connectors between those 2 schools and what might make sense there. And then I guess the third one is, you know, if we get to the conversation around using school stabilization, I guess I would put that back into your camp, Sarah and Craig, to put the school facility committee on notice. I was actually at their last meeting, and they were going to relook at needs and come up with a list. And so I'm not even sure that roads and sidewalks are on their priority list, but that certainly could be flagged for them. Because I think they were headed down the path of like, what else could we use the school stabilization fund for? And I think they were going to go back to the A13 report and start combing through that versus thinking about roads and sidewalks. And I didn't look back to see if that was actually addressed in that report also.
I can touch base with Jason as another action item.
Yeah. I mean, I see technology, electrical, plumbing, yeah. And the exterior talks about roofs and walls. It doesn't really talk about what connects the building to the buildings. Okay. Am I missing anything else in terms of follow-up on that?
No,
I don't think so.
that's what I got too.
Very good synopsis.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions on roads and sidewalks for now?
Nope.
Okay. Then let's enter the brave new world of transportation. And there's 3 requests. There's just to kind of preview, there's the existing school bus lease and electric bus lease. There's the request for a replacement of the Bluebird with an additional diesel, and then there's the athletic vans conversation. So let's start with the reoccurring one, which is the existing school bus leases, the 8 diesel and the 1 electric.
I will say up front that I will try and keep them separate, but there's a
Yes.
chance that my my conversation may bleed from one to the other because they're somewhat interconnected.
I totally understand, and there's some good data actually in the additional bus
Yeah, that
memo too that might need to get pulled forward. So I understand what you're saying.
great. So currently
Do you mind making that just a little bit bigger for us? Sorry.
better.
Yes, thank you.
So we are currently in year 3 of a 4-year lease for 8 school buses. And we are also in lease for 1 electric school bus. We are looking to continue to fund both of these. so that we can continue to support our students. I will say we are in a bit of a funny place with the electric school bus. We have requested $25,000 per year to cover the lease. They actually have not billed us. However, we feel strongly that should those bills come due and they actually bill us, that we need to have the funding available. So that is why that continues to be a request. But the other buses, they are our main buses. We are requesting an additional bus for next school year. I'm gonna switch memos here for a moment just to talk about both and give some background. Currently, we have 8 routes for our students, and we are really, and it says 9 here because our bus number 1 is our METCO bus. So we really have 8 routes currently, and 3 of those routes are at capacity. We have to bus certain students. We have to bus our elementary students and those who live outside of 2 miles. And the remainder of our students who take the bus do pay a fee. And we are seeing an increase in ridership over the last couple of years on the buses. We think part of that is because a lot of parents are going back into offices, and fewer are dropping off. And so we anticipate that that trend will continue. And you can see we have 3 buses that are at capacity and others that are getting close. And so in order to best meet the needs of our growing ridership, we are looking to add 1 additional bus. We had an additional bus for years. It was sort of lovingly referred to as the Bluebird bus, but our Bluebird bus is no longer working and is actually in process of being surplused and sold for parts. So, this is a history of our bus routes, and we are currently at 8 routes with 8 lease buses. Sorry, that's last year, with 1 rented bus. And we are looking to, and we have 2 spare buses, but we really need to, when the Bluebird goes away, we need to continue to have a spare bus. And so we are looking to, sorry, here we are.
Yeah.
So we only have the 1 spare bus right now because the Bluebird is no longer working. And so if we add the bus, we will be able to run 9 routes, which is really what our ridership needs. We also have several routes that are really long for Cohasset. And so this would also help minimize the length of time that our students are on buses. And it would give us that 1 spare bus, because right now, without that additional bus, if we go to a 9th route, we really don't have the capacity to do that and have, in case a bus breaks down. And our electric bus has not been super reliable as much as we would like it to be, and it can only do runs in town. And sometimes even in town, it struggles if the weather is really cold or whatnot. It's also had to be serviced a couple of times. And so having a spare bus is really important.
Yes. I was reminded when I looked at this chart, how we have, part of it is the history that when we started the lease bus program, we were running a 3-tier system with 6 routes. And so we had 3 spare buses and they were all owned. And the goal was, as they became older, they would get surplused. But then we flipped, because of the late start, to a 2-tier system with 8 routes. And that took us down in terms of the number of spare buses we had, which we goosed, I guess, for 1 year or 2 years with rented buses. But now we're left in a place where we only have 1 spare bus. And if you're running the spare bus ideally is a diesel one, because that can leave early for athletics. So you're running the electric in town and leaving one of the diesels as your spare, so that they could leave for a 2:30 athletic route, I
Exactly.
would think. So I was surprised, just sort of summarize, I was surprised at how we decreased the number of spare buses quite substantially over the years. And there's been a number of different factors, but being down to one is just sort of the bare minimum.
Yeah, and there were times where I believe last year, I obviously wasn't in the district, but there were times where there, you know, had to double up bus routes and things to accommodate if not enough buses were working. So having that spare bus is really important. And so that is the reason for that the additional bus request, to match the 8 buses plus the electric bus request. I think the chart here that also talks about the minutes per route, just to share. So we have one bus route that's 50 minutes long for our students. That's a long time considering we're a small town, and 2 others that are at 40 minutes. And so ideally we would keep our kids closer to 30 minutes on the bus. And so between the max capacity and some of our minutes per route, that's really why we're looking for that 9th route.
Yeah. And I went back to the other transportation presentation, and in 2 years, you've had an increase at the elementary school ridership of 38 students. So, more than half of a bus has been an increase in ridership over the last 2 years.
Yes. Exactly. And, some of our elementary students are tiny, but when you add in their instruments and sort of just no matter how tiny they are, they wiggle and they have backpacks and all the things, it gets very squishy on those buses.
Okay. So just so I'm super clear on what years we're in year 3 currently on our 8 diesel. Next year, fiscal 26 is going to be year 4, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're in year 3 this year. The year that we're funding, fiscal 26, is going to be the final year of the existing 8 bus lease. For the electric, it was a little bit more complicated in that it was based on when the unit was delivered, but I believe I had figured it out. You check me on this one, Sue.
It was
Yeah, it's 25 now per year, but we did 25 in year 1, but we didn't get the bus till August. So year 1 was only deducted, 1 quarter of the year. So then in year 2, we only applied the difference or whatever it is.
But we took delivery in May of 2023. So let's call that fiscal 24 for all intensive purposes, because we didn't start using it until fiscal 24. The fall of 23, which was fiscal 24.
Yes.
So the lease, I think, is 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. If I'm correct.
Oh, gotcha. That's your question. Okay.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna be funding year 4 of 4 for the diesel, and we're gonna be funding year 3 of 5 for
Yes.
the electric.
Exactly.
That sound right?
That's
and
correct.
the company has told us that for the additional bus, they would give us a 1-year lease so that when the 8 bus lease is up, they would roll all 9
Yeah.
buses.
Okay.
So in the memo here where it says the electric bus ends in fiscal 27, that's really 28. Is that what you're getting at, Katie?
I think so, yeah.
So it's not coterminous with the other leases.
It's not
It was
coterminous,
meant to be, but the delivery
Good,
probably
delayed it.
screwed that
Right.
up.
right?
Okay.
And if I understand correctly, looking back at the appropriations, we have appropriated 25,000. We didn't appropriate anything in fiscal 24. We appropriated 7,000 in fiscal 25. And we're talking about appropriating another 25,000 in fiscal 26. So we'll have appropriated across all 3 years, $57,000. But that $57,000 has not been invoiced against.
Correct.
So we've got a balance and then we're basically creating a balance in an account of $57,000.
Yes. Yep, because we're making an assumption that they are going to,
Collect.
Eventually come calling.
Yes.
Somebody will, right? Who knows who? Right.
I have a question though. If that bus has been unreliable, and given the fact they've gone bankrupt, do we not have cause to terminate?
We do, and we've had several conversations with them, Francine, and they're ongoing. But it doesn't seem as if some of the maintenance issues are really as challenging as they appear, at least not to an L, shall I say.
I'm sorry, were you using a term there in terms of being able to terminate?
So there is a termination clause within
Okay.
the contract, and it's due to non-performance. Unfortunately, the maintenance issues that we have aren't considered non-performance issues,
Okay.
because it is a demonstration project, so.
So Michelle, when the bus has to come out of service for maintenance, do they give us a loaner bus?
They don't, they just cover the cost of the maintenance.
And have they been doing that even though they were bankrupt?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm assuming so. I would need
Yes.
someone else to answer that question.
So
They are.
covering the.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I thought you heard me. Yes. They have to pay the vendor who sold us the bus directly. So any maintenance and repairs are billed directly through the bus company and NL.
So you don't see that then necessarily, because that's a separate transaction outside
Correct.
Cohasset Public School.
I'm assuming that if they hadn't been paid, that the vendor that sold us the bus or sold them the bus would be calling.
Sure.
I mean, it sounds like in an ideal world, we would love to terminate and just get another diesel and have 10 diesels instead of
Mhm.
1 electric plus 10.
That'd be preference.
But because that would also help with transportation outside the district
Right.
for athletics,
Mhm.
which right now you can't do with the electric.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so let's talk about the number side of it.
Yep.
Synopsis on that.
sharing for a minute. Oh, you want me to go back to that?
S-
The
So-
lease costs, I see, I
Yeah,
can see them in different places, but
I think the total lease cost for the 8 diesels is 151,300. The lease cost for the electric is 25,000. And the 1-year lease cost for the additional bus is 20,650. Which brings us to 151,300, 25,000. So for a 10 bus fleet, that brings us to 196,950. Which is always shocking to me that flash forward 10 years and the cost per bus has remained at 19,000. Like, what in life in terms of a lease bus remains $19,000, but it does.
But buses haven't changed much, I guess.
I know, but like everything, but with inflation, you would have thought
No, I'm
that,
just teasing. Yeah,
yeah, we would have, but.
Still
yes.
yellow, still this long, right?
Yes, exactly.
Still have doors that go like this. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no added luxuries to it.
No. If there were, we'd take them out. Kids need to learn.
I mean, I think the question for this committee is that in the past, for the eight diesel lease, we have not funded the full 151,000. We've only funded 90,000. That was based on the original total cost of ownership model, which hasn't been updated the last couple of years, but the schools have been getting a flat 90,000 for that lease. So a discussion for another time, but the total cost of all the leases being proposed here is 196,950.
Right, yeah, I mean, one thing we talked about was how you, this has come up in town meeting before, right? Why is capital budget involved in leasing something, right? And I guess for the background for Chris, because Katie's lived this, but you know, what was clear was that we were spending, when we owned buses, basically after 5 years, the maintenance cost of the buses skyrocketed. And the town of Cohasset is not necessarily good at being in the business of bus repair. So we were spending we don't have facilities. It's not like we run a giant fleet where we'd have multiple techs on hand, all these sorts of things. So it was a lot less, it proved to be a lot less expensive, net to lease than it was to have both a capital purchase cost and a repair cost, never mind the issues with having, a bus be down for long periods of time. So the town basically, the capital budget, made the decision to just get out of bus ownership, period, and instead have it as a lease cost. So back then there was some calculation based on what the maintenance costs were versus what the capital purchase costs were, and they came up with a number which worked at that time. But right now, there's no clear basis for trying to figure out how much of a lease is capital cost versus not capital cost. The argument could be made that it's majority, right? A lease is largely depreciation with some sort of, lease factor. So that's kind of where I think the committee has that discussion about both this lease cycle, but also going forward, what's appropriate. I don't think we should ever get into buying buses. I mean, if you think about trying to buy 10 buses, it's going to cost us more than leasing 10 buses. It's just impossible. So I'm not really sure we can do anything about it, but we certainly, I think, should all understand what our contribution should be. Because the 90 number doesn't seem to be really based on much. I mean, Susan and Francine and Ralph, if you understand more specifically how they got to that number or what it was, but I think going forward, it would make sense for us to reflect more kind of what the lease cost is.
I have to say, I don't recall exactly why we arrived at that number. That would take a little research.
I have a very boring, I could bring up the Excel spreadsheet and walk you through it, but there is a methodology of the madness, but it's based on a 2015 cost of maintenance plug.
Yeah, it's useless. Okay.
Because,
Right.
the flip side is if you have a fleet of 10, you're going to be replacing one bus every year at $120,000. Plus you have to maintain a fleet that has varying ages, from 1 to 10 years. And once you get past 5, you're spending, lots of money and lots of time repairing old buses, which is why the decision was made to get out of the owning.
Yeah,
for
that
a lot of
Corey's
great-
point that to buy a bunch of buses right now would be impossible to fund. And I think, well, this is actually the question for the schools in terms of having them all coterminous certainly makes things easier to manage, but how are we experiencing, when buses go out of service? Is that becoming, do we have any metrics on that, I guess is what I'm asking, is there an argument to say we should do them like we do other fleets in the town where we refresh off cycle?
I guess I would ask Sue to answer that, because I think my answer would be that as the leases come up, we get new buses. So I don't know that that's as much of an issue in this case, but Sue, am I wrong there?
No, you're correct. And that's kind of why we stick to the 4 to 5 year
Mhm.
lease and try to, have the turnover when they hit the 5th year. Because that's when we found that the maintenance starts to rise.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I was really pleasantly surprised. There was one of the documents, I can't quite find it right now, but the maintenance numbers on the lease fleet are quite low. It's like less than $2,000 per bus,
Yeah,
Which
that's great
is-
information. Yeah.
which was,
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the age of the buses being maintained at a low. Some of our buses back when we did the original study were very old.
they were like 15 plus years, like
Right, yeah.
yeah.
Right. So 20 grand
Marty
a
was
bus per
duct
year.
taping them together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
forget it.
good. Not a good look.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we understand the rationale for moving from 8 to 9 routes.
Mhm.
It would take the average ridership down from like 68, 69, I think down to 60, spread across 9, and it would reduce the length of the route time from upwards of 45 minutes to a more average 30-ish. Is that right, Sarah?
That's our goal.
Okay. And it would keep an all-important spare in the mix. Okay.
Which
All
then
right.
get deployed for athletics and such like that, right? They don't just sit around, right?
Yeah. That spare is leaving the district, like
Would-
multiple times per week.
Yes, probably almost daily.
I'd say
Yeah,
daily.
at 2:30, loaded with somebody going somewhere. Okay,
Right.
let's look back.
Vans or,
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Are there any questions on just the core fleet before we move on to vans?
Yeah, Katie and myself have been through this a lot of times, and Sarah and Craig and Sue have been just remarkable with being responsive and getting lots of information. So we've been through this a bunch of stuff. So for us, this is, we're just kind of rehashing, but this is all new for you, the year 3. So, if we're leaving stuff out, please let us know, because I think Katie and I just, we're prone to doing that since we've already talked about it. So.
Yeah, I actually really appreciate the memos that you wrote, Sarah, because they had a lot of great information in them that are very useful. We've heard that spoken about in the past, but no one's ever actually really put that much to paper, and that's very helpful.
Great,
Second that. Yeah, this is definitely
yeah.
a
And
step, an improvement. Yeah.
Sue and Jerry helped pull a lot of information together, so it was a team
Mhm.
effort.
It was a team effort.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen again. This one has a lot of information.
Yes, it
Um,
does.
So I know for years, there's been a request or conversation around potentially vans to support the district and most specifically the athletic department. So this is a request for 2 district vans. It would be a combined lease of about $33,690 per year. We really think there is a great need for these vans to supplement the one spare bus that we have, and all of the sports that we offer. Currently, we rely on the larger buses, but it's often inefficient or unavailable. And we also have sports where, because we don't have the ability to transport, we ask students and their families to actually transport the athletes themselves. And so we think that for these reasons, along with some other reasons, it makes sense for us to have 2 vans. Approximately 45 athletic trips per year rely on student and parent transportation. These are some of our smaller teams, our varsity and JV boys and girls golf, boys JV tennis, girls JV tennis, and varsity ski. And so, we're often asking them to transport themselves, not just to practices, but to matches as well. And for some of those, the golf especially, we're only able to get some practice time at courses that are either in Scituate and Rockland. And so those are practice spots that are at a distance where we require them to provide their own transportation. This past fall alone, we had 98 scheduled athletic trips, and 33 of them had to be filled by outside vendors, which cost us a lot of money. There have been a lot of factors that have added to why we need additional transportation. For a small district, we actually offer a lot of athletic options for our students, and we recently have added some sports. So there was a great desire for girls volleyball, and we actually are able to fill 3 teams, a freshman team, a JV team, a varsity team. In addition, we added JV boys golf. This year, more boys came out for golf than ever before, and so a JV boys team was added to grow the program. And we are trying to provide all of our sub-varsity sports with full schedules. And one of the interesting things, as I was talking with Steve Rotundi, our athletic director, about how do we capture this information, what was interesting is what he said was that we can capture when sports have to be canceled or moved when we can't get transportation. What we can't really capture necessarily are all the times he has to tell another athletic director that we can't even schedule a event because we know we can't get transportation for those students. So there are lost opportunities. And he had been talking about a team that had about 7 matches. But in an ideal world, that team would have a fuller schedule of matches. But because we can't schedule them for transportation reasons, we have smaller schedules for some of those teams. In addition, we used to co-op several of our teams, cross country, softball, and track and field, and we no longer co-op those teams. And so when we co-opt, we had greater opportunity to share transportation resources. Now that we are our independent teams, we are providing all of the transportation. And the MIAA has changed how they do tournament brackets. And so in the past, we may have only had to play our regional teams for those first couple of tournament games. But now with the power rankings, a lot of our teams may have to travel really far. I can think of a time where I had to drive out. My goodness, I just lost the name of the team, but it was like an hour and a half away for a first round game. And so these trips come at significant costs because when you have to lease a bus or rent a bus for those trips, it's more because it's so far away. Whereas if we had our own transportation, we'd be able to really save that money. Right now, if we look at a breakdown of athletics, we are outsourcing 140 hours and providing our own 464 hours of transportation for athletics. So, 140 hours that we have to outsource is a lot, and that does add up. And in
About $260 an hour, I think, is what I estimated. So it's like $36,000 in cost right there.
which is more than our ask, actually.
I do have one question for you, Sue, on this table before you move past it, because it is a little bit of a bouncing ball in terms of like the outsourced transportation hours. Because in fiscal 23, you had to do 253 hours outsourced, and yet in fiscal 24, you were able to squeeze it down to only 70 and still service more. You went from, I hear you on the increased sports transportation, because you went from 927 total hours in fiscal 23 to 1,158. So you had, obviously a 25% increase in terms of the number of athletic transportation hours you had to cover. And yet you were able to do it with fewer outsourced transportation hours year over year. So I know it's before you, but that's just an interesting phenomena.
We were renting buses
We
last
were
year, so
right.
had buses as part of our fleet last year. So if I go back to here. So this is number of leased buses, number of rented buses owned and electric, right?
So
Yes.
you had the Bluebird working and you had one rented bus?
2.
No, that was the year before,
Oh,
Sue.
the year before, sorry.
But last year we had a rented bus and we had the Bluebird bus, so we were better able to manage it within our own selves. And
Well,
now,
then something was really wrong in 23 because you actually had more transportation resources, but
I don't know
maybe,
what happened
may-
there.
maybe you had fewer drivers. I don't know, but it's interesting. Okay, so basically you were able to manage the number of outsourced last year because you had equipment and drivers.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we also have more teams going to some of these invitationals where we're really only sending those who qualify. And right now we're having to use full buses. So just economically, it would be better to send them on a van than it would be to use a full bus. And the MIAA is offering more workshops for students. And again, economically, for lots of reasons, to send 6 or 8 students on a full bus versus using a van doesn't make fiscal sense. And so as we look at all of our teams, Steve Rotundi did create this chart for me, where we were able to see for each team what the size of the team is and really like the number of third-party rentals that we had to do last year. This is based on last year's data, and number of games that were impacted due to transportation issues. And you can see that the highlighted yellow sports are sports that would be, if we had vans, they would be, they are currently sports that rely on parent transportation 95% of the time. They are our sports that would really be primarily supported by these vans. And the green highlighted ones rely on parent transportation for invitationals and state tournaments. And so again, we would be able to meet those needs with these vans.
So, Sarah, I
ahead.
have a question for you just on the table itself. If you go up to boys soccer as an example. So boys soccer, 42 athletes, that's JV and varsity. I assume the yes could benefit because maybe JV fits into a van. Obviously varsity probably doesn't or wouldn't fit into one van, might fit into 2. They had only 5 away games
Last season.
last season. I guess I just wanted to make sure I understood what Steve was trying to communicate. He had to rent for all 5 of those. Is that
That's what-
correct?
Yes, and my guess is that in doing that, he probably had to also move 3 games in order to find buses that were available to meet those needs. Is the way he explained this to me.
Okay, because there were only 5 away. Oh, is it 5 away games are the ones that actually happened, not the ones that were scheduled? I guess. Do you see what I'm saying? Like the way I read it, there are 5 away games and he solved it by renting 5 times.
That's how I read it. That
Okay, but then what were the 3 that were impacted?
they have had to change the date in order to get the bus. Like he has had
Okay,
to
gotcha.
call
So
and say the game is on Tuesday and they say we don't have a bus, but we can give you a bus on Wednesday. And so he calls that school and they move the game.
Okay, so impacted could mean many things. It could mean impacted, canceled, impacted, had to time shift.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay, so
Because I do know some of the time he had to cancel because he couldn't provide transportation.
Yeah, for JV more so than varsity. I think varsity, he always managed to shift.
okay.
Again, these are some of our sports that would be able to primarily rely on van transportation. We also provided data from other districts, and we are comparable to many of these districts that have vans in the number of sports and number of teams that we offer versus some of the other schools. And so really, we think that this would help with the athletics. We also talked about the fact that our future vision is to continue as academics to provide more opportunities for students to be in town working with collaborative partners during the actual school day. And so while it's hard to capture what this could look like, because this is like what we're trying to build, we think that there's opportunity to use these vans during the school day as well, to support some of our internships. That's a growing program, and additional partnerships with local businesses and organizations for our students as part of their coursework.
Who drives the vans?
So we have coaches for the teams that would be driving the vans. And then if it was academically, we would have certain people who were available to drive the vans. In my prior district, we had vans, and as somebody who got cleared to drive those vans, you have to provide some information. You have to request your driving record from the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and then typically you get cleared to be able to drive a van. So there's no special license required. We just require you to have a clean driving record.
Sarah, can I just jump in? Katie, would it be all right with you and the committee? I'm just where we've been here 90 minutes now, and we have two more issues to address. And this isn't, you guys aren't making any decisions tonight. We can always maybe reserve some other questions for another night, or even in writing. Could we just move on so we can just get through every issue, and then obviously there'll be need for another follow-up meeting or something to that nature. Would that be all right?
That's fine, I guess. I want to make sure that the committee at least need to have a chance to sort of debrief, and so
Sure, totally understandable. I just feel like where we've gone over some of the materials, I feel like there may be a need for the committee to further digest things, and so we're not going to hit all questions now anyway. And I just, obviously, yeah, I've got two administrators on the call that need to go to work tomorrow. So I know we have two more issues. And so I'm just asking for maybe we can streamline it a little bit for tonight, but it's up to you. It's not my committee. I'm just making the request.
Yeah, Craig, I think, what's interesting, this is like the second time around with these vans, right? And I think this version of it is much more developed than it's been in the past. And I do want to give this time to kind of keep going. So if we could, Sarah, what I'll suggest is, I have some follow-ups and just a few small things, but if you want to stop sharing, we can just poll the rest of the committee to see if there's immediate follow-ups for this meeting that Francine, Susan, and Chris, you guys have, or if there's things that we want to submit, because if there's just small questions, then let's get rid of them. But if there's other stuff that we can come back, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to just knock something out if we can.
Understood.
Yeah, I don't have any questions that need to be answered right now, but I will have questions about the lease document themselves for the vans.
yeah. I guess my biggest strategic question is this. 2 vans cost $33,000 and seats 30. We could get 1 77 passenger additional diesel for $19,000.
Can only go one place,
Give you a
no, at
second
time,
spare.
right?
You can only go one place, right?
We could only go one place.
Well, except that if a team has more than 15
But
people,
it also
it's the
covers a
same thing.
core route when you've got an
Right.
electric that's wonky. That's my, so again, I'm sort of thinking about your electric wonky. And you're gonna be running 9 routes and you have a second bus go out, then so again, you're increasing the number of routes from 8 to 9. and you've got a wonky electric bus. So I'm just posing it out there as I understand that you can only go in one direction with a 77-person bus, but you're actually solving other. That's my big strategic question about vans versus one more bus.
Susan, what certification you need to drive one of the vans? Can one of the coaches or the teachers drive it?
Yes,
There's another issue there, Katie, because you need an additional bus driver as well to use a bus.
yes.
Right,
But we
you
have them.
You have
Right.
11 bus drivers on payroll. I know you've outsourced 2 this year, but you've got 11 on payroll.
We do for during the day, and so when we go, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but when they then do runs in the evening for sports, it costs us additional money, whereas if a coach drives it, it doesn't actually cost us that additional money.
Correct.
So there's a operating budget benefit to you for that.
There, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
My follow-ups were, I've always had kind of a little bit of a quantum mechanics problem with this request, which is you obviously have the amount of trips that are impacted. But what I keep doing is I slice it, I say, well, okay, how many of those impacted trips would one team, take 2 vans, and then the rest of the impacted trips will still be there, right? Or that kind of thing. So what I'm always in my head, and last time we went through this, Susan, Sarah, my question was, is there a way we can pilot this to see if is 2 the right number? Is it 3? Like, is it 1? I mean, that's kind of the thing where I just don't want to get in a scenario where we are looking back. And again, this is a lot of just near-term recency bias, where we went through with the senior center buying the wrong thing. And I just want to be sure that we have, this is a 5-year lease, which is long, right? And I want to be sure that we are doing it right, whatever that means. So, because I keep seeing, again, if one coach doesn't show up and you've got 2 sets of buses, I'm a little worried that when deployed, the amount of impacted trips won't go down as far because each day is kind of weirdly different.
Corey, that's a fair point. I mean, would one van be much more palatable to the committee?
No, I don't want to do. I think the question is what's going to be the most impact. It's not 1 or 2. It's if it, what's going to solve the most. Because if one doesn't help you, then that's a waste of money too. The only concern I have is maximizing return for our investment, right? So make sure, and I don't know if 2 of that configuration, maybe you need a big van or a small van. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, is a minivan better? Like, this is exactly what we went through with senior center, where once they had the vans and they started deploying them, what they realized they needed was not at all what they conceptualized they needed. So I'm throwing that out there to say I'd love to solve the quantum mechanics problem of this and have some historical experience.
So what I can tell you is that, well, first of all, yes, I would be open to piloting for a year and seeing what the right combination of things is. I also know that at one point we did have a van available and like teams used it. I think my concern with the van versus buses is that we're still going to end up with the teams that don't have real transportation. I think what will end up happening is some of these other bigger teams will continue to use the buses, and we'll still have some of these smaller teams. And for me, that's an equity issue, because those kids deserve to have free transportation and not rely on parents as well. But I would be open to sort of looking at what a pilot could look like. I'd be open to seeing if Sue could call and see if there would be an opportunity to do a 1-year lease to see. It gives us more data, but I think that I don't have a concern that the vans won't be used.
And I know there's documents somewhere there, and there's a lot of documents where the athletic director has shown out of, if there's 48 teams with 2 vans, all but maybe 5 teams can be transported with the use of 2 vans versus 1. It limits us when there's 1 to just the smaller teams, but with 2 vans, it covers a good portion of our teams.
So Corey, you want this a little bit further baked, is that right? Like, you want that information Sue was just telling you?
So yeah, what Sue's referencing doesn't answer the scenario of we get 1 team out, but you actually have two teams, one that requires two buses and one that requires or two vans, one that requires one van. Like, so that's what I'm trying to get at exactly. If we establishing how many trips the two vans reduce, because again, you're going to have days where multiple teams need the van, some of which are bigger, some of which are smaller, right? And so it's not just that we have this many trips and this many teams. That's why I said it's quantum mechanics, right? You have multiple moving pieces.
I think it
Why
might
don't we
be.
take this back and look at it for you a little bit more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it might be helpful to answer that quantum mechanics question is to take a month of like the busy peak season and show, like, graph it out for Corey, because like some of it is like, it is very complex. But actually, if you just put it on a piece of paper, here's what the month of December looked like. Like, here are the trips, here's how we solved it, here's how vans could have solved it better. I think if you do that for just maybe not the whole year, but for just a chunk of time, it might help that quantum mechanics
Okay.
question become a little bit clearer.
Understood, you guys. We'll look at how to better present that to you so that,
Okay.
that maybe you have a better insight into what our needs are. I mean, I think that this is a failure on our end to not present you the information you need. So
Oh,
No,
obviously we endeavored to do that before this meeting, but give us a chance to do that. So we're not spinning our wheels here talking about hypothetical situations.
no, there's a lot of great information, just to be clear. And it sounds like there's a lot more information packaged together than's been provided in the past. It's just athletic transportation is the bane of every athletic director in every district I've ever talked with. So it's complex and just getting the right balance. But,
Yeah, we'll get you that information.
and we've also solved it about 15 different ways over the last 3 years by throwing more buses at it, by throwing more drivers at it. And now we're coming up with a new request, which is some vans. So I think we'll get to the right answer, but, all right. So moving on for Craig's, request. I do think that we've got one more, left, which is a combined conversation about some enhancements at the Deer Hill and cameras at the Deer Hill and Middle High School. So maybe we start with the PA systems because that's quick and easy and pretty clear what needs to happen, and then we can talk about cameras.
So both of these requests really are to continue to enhance our security systems at our schools. While our main job is to educate students, our other main job is to keep our students safe. And so all of these help us do this. We currently have 2 spaces at our elementary schools where our PA systems, one is not working, one doesn't have one. And they are used regularly. And in a moment of crisis, anyone in those spaces cannot hear any announcement that is made. So should we call a shelter in place? They don't know. Should we require them to move or stay where they are? They don't know. We are trying to make do, but that doesn't always work well. And we want to ensure that by fixing the PA system at the Osgood and installing a PA system in the courtyard at the Deer Hill, and I should have said the gymnasium at the Osgood, that we are really able to effectively communicate with our students and staff should an emergency situation occur.
Or non-emergency that you just need to tell people something. Yeah. It's just like,
Exactly. Okay. And these are estamates.
We are
Okay.
working to get those folks, that company out to actually give real quotes. The quote at Osgood has been a little harder because they have to figure out what's wrong with it. So he's working on getting that for us.
Okay. But 9,500 is sort of the high end for both PA, one fix and one new system. Okay.
Realize
Okay.
Love to share. So let me make sure I share my screen for this one. So this one is about cameras. We do use cameras to allow our administrators to effectively manage the daily operations of the building. We have a need to enhance the cameras at Deer Hill and at the Cohasset Middle and High Schools. What we currently have makes it difficult to monitor properly. And at the Deer Hill in 2016, 2017, cameras were part of the initial security enhancement, and we're looking to upgrade some of those cameras and add in some places. We are also looking to do similar at the middle school and high school. That project is a little bit bigger than what we've requested here, so we're breaking it up into 2 years. And so both principals have highlighted for us the priority areas of need. And so those are part of this request. And upgrading this infrastructure will provide us with more reliable coverage of all areas of the school, including entrances, hallways, parking lots, and other critical areas. And some of it, we have a lot of people in the building outside of ourselves who are renting our spaces. And so this also helps at times. And for us, really, if there's a potential threat right now, being able to see where that threat is really important, especially because our cameras are fed into the main offices and the Cohasset Police Department. And so at any time, they would be able to monitor what's happening in our buildings. And right now we have some hidden spots, and we want to make it so that those spots are visible should we have an emergency situation occur.
Okay, so I'll just chime in here because, and I think you can stop sharing that document, Sarah. We are able to effectively manage threats to our schools right now. So I take issue with the substance of that document. We're able to do that. The police department has an extremely close relationship with the school district. Their response time is minutes. It's absolutely immediate. The basis of the request is basically to upgrade existing security measures because some of them are aging. We can improve upon, any system, obviously, but I don't want to mislead anyone into thinking that like the current school campus is not safe.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
yeah, correct. To that point, as I understand, these are requests that are more directed towards administration principals when it comes to just day-to-day operations of the building. Obviously, any camera can be used in emergency situations and everything's in PD, but the day-to-day purpose of these is administration of the schools. And just
that's correct. That's correct. It's just
Okay.
that the document itself, which I wasn't aware that it was going to be, sort of like relied upon to this extent, but the document itself could be interpreted to maybe imply that our district wasn't outfitted properly to make sure the students are safe. They're safe. We're monitoring them, and we would be aware if we have secure buildings, we'd be aware of threats. We're able to communicate that with the police department. But as you just articulated, Corey, we're looking to invest some money in order to upgrade the overall system for various reasons, including administrative.
So the total request is 9,500 for PA and year 1 of 2 for camera upgrades at this year for 91,338. So the total request between the two is 100,838. With the understanding that there's going to be a follow-on request in fiscal 27 for additional camera upgrades at Osgood and the middle high school campus.
Yeah, similar to the screens, we're trying to split it up.
Yep.
makes sense.
Okay.
So the reason the middle school, high school is approximate still is because we have the quotes for both schools, but because the principals prioritize certain ones,
Yep.
having them come back out to determine, because it was hard to determine when you look at those requests,
Yeah,
They constituted which cameras.
yeah. I think the quote was for 14 and you're requesting 12, so the 49 is probably on the higher side. It might come down a couple $1,000 when it's finalized. Do you think that's something that that Ron will have in sort of the next couple weeks before we sort of get to the final puzzle
I-
pieces?
I'm hoping so, yes.
Okay. And I would point out just to the capital budget committee that the select board is actually meeting tomorrow night to talk about camera policy in general. So from a policy perspective, the select board is actually already sort of taking the lead on this. We're here
It's-
to approve projects.
Yeah, it's a little different bucket though, which is, this is kind of town-wide for, town monitoring its assets, not really a bucket of operations of, kids in buildings. So I
Yep.
do think that the select board is trying to figure out exactly what they're trying to accomplish. So that tomorrow's conversation will be instructive. But I'm not I'm not sure it'll affect this request as much as it'll reflect the library and the senior center requests, because those are
Okay.
really asset protection where these are operational, so and administrative. So
All right. And I think you noted that the cameras that we're replacing are from 2016, 17, so they are, as you noted, on the older side. Okay. I don't have any additional questions on camera and PA. Anybody else on the committee? Okay.
the only question would be for camera and MSBA core program. How does that affect year 2 and or any thoughts on time to deployment for these upgrades? Is this it seems like on this list it's a pretty straightforward ask, but whenever there's a big IT project, we always ask, is there any chance that this is going to naturally get pushed back a year just because of complexity and installation, so we can buy ourselves some funding flexibility? But this is a much smaller request, so I don't imagine that's possible here.
Yeah, no, I think that this would, I'm trying, if I understand correctly, no, we
It
would
was a
want
lot.
to really
Okay.
be a priority request.
Okay, gotcha. And stuff that we could execute on immediately. Okay.
Okay. So unless there's any other questions, I think we will follow up with sort of specific questions. I think the most of them are gonna come around athletic vans. Maybe there'll be some from the crowd around some of the other requests, but it seems like the athletic vans is maybe the ones that we need to sort of rescope a little bit.
That's
And-
really the only one that's a fleet increase. I mean, the additional lease bus is really a replacement for an existing fleet item. So our fleet size on school buses isn't changing. The only kind of fleet difference is the 2 vans, and that's usually what causes us to circle back is the fleet upgrades or expansions.
And the other one that just had some outstanding questions, I think we already captured, were roads and sidewalks. So those were probably the two that needed a little bit of fine tuning, roads and sidewalks, just because it's
And do you want to be invited as well to the meeting with Brian, or is that just putting, okay, yes, Sarah, okay. We don't want to waste your time, but B, don't want you to feel like you're not part of the conversation. So we'll CC you on that.
Thank you.
okay, great. Well, I want to thank you for taking all the time tonight, but also for all the prep time in advance. I really appreciate how well it was organized and packaged. I know that it helps all of us to be able to come in, like, at least knowing what we're talking about instead of figuring it out on the fly. So I would just again say thank you on that front.
Yeah, great
Yes.
background, a lot of good work. Yeah.
And I would say I just have appreciated the collaboration along the way in the conversation. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's been great.
Yes, thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
All right, well, we'll circle back with questions and then keep you in the loop in terms of timing. But I think next week we're talking to DPW about their requests, and then we're kind of getting to the end Then we've got town hall, sorry, that's like.
Well, the select board has to figure out what they're doing.
We're
So,
we're not
yeah.
quite done yet, but
So.
we are making progress, so,
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
all right, thanks,
Have a good
guys.
Good
night.
evening, everybody.
Yep. All right, what do we have left on our agenda?
All
Town
right.
hall.
Yeah, I tossed two things in here that were kind of late. Just good updates for everybody. So let me just get the order of operations here ready to go. I've got all my sheets and stuff. Okay, so yep. So town hall updates. So the latest with this committee talked was we had kind of those three that one bucket for town hall requests, which were fire suppression, windows, and then HVAC. Yeah, were the
Yes.
three things that were HVAC design, and that was about $600,000. So, and Michelle, if you want to fill in or whatever, tap me out. But with the
Windows
basically-
was the other one.
right, yeah. So, however, the building needs a lot more work than that. So there is yet again another kind of sub working group for looking at town hall, and the latest wins are suggesting that we take a bigger bite of the town hall apple and wrap it into a bigger request, which then we could bond over a certain amount of years. And the scope of that is kind of where I think is still unclear, where obviously the building, through, and this is mainly background for Chris, because Francine and Susan has been through this tireless number of times.
Scars are had.
Yeah, the building, if you're gonna fix the thing and make it look, nice and new and use it for another 20 years, probably needs $10 to $15 million of work or more. One thing we've always run into is that once you start upgrading a building, you run into ADA requirements where you have to bring everything up to code if you do X amount of work. However, that whole thing there's an interpretation and there's back and forth on that. So what we're talking about now is figuring out how to, just keep the building functional, not necessarily renovate it and fix it, but largely just keep it working. And so the scope of what is being done is more in that vein, which is, if you're going to tear apart the ceiling to install fire suppression, you want to do the air conditioning at the same time, right? If you're going to do the air conditioning, you should do the windows, because the windows have direct relationship on what the size of the air conditioning and heating you're going to put in, right? So it's all these systems are connected. The electrical build, everything's connected. So at a certain point, the project keeps rolling bigger and bigger. The snowball keeps getting larger, and then eventually you get into a $15 million project that just doesn't work. So trying to figure out where to stop the snowball from rolling is kind of the art that's happening right now. And what we did in the agenda was say town hall update and 5 to 10 year outlook, because one opportunity we have next year is that a bunch of debt service that we are paying right now is rolling off. So let me just share which one, the capital stabilization fund analysis. Or
Hold on, I can tell you.
I got it.
You got it?
Yep. So FY26, and we've got the debt service payments, which drop. I don't know if this is Michelle, I think we confirmed this number pretty close. Yeah. So a bunch of things roll off, including
That's our
senior
500
center.
That's our 517,000 for this year.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is all the stuff that ends FY26. So we have the ability to absorb, let's say, if you sum these up, $444,000 of debt service without impacting what kind of our cash spend is today. Never mind our 2.5% increase or any interest we make. It would basically, it wouldn't affect our outlook on what we're able to spend money on. And
Well, it does, but it just.
correct. It
We
doesn't
could spend
drastically.
that 400,000 on something else, but I hear you. I understand
Exactly.
what you're saying.
Yeah. So the current thought is, and Michelle, if this is no longer the current thought, please tell me to shut up. That try to fit whatever town hall building committee can into debt service that's somewhat fits in this box. And
Of
to that-
$450,000 annually in debt service.
exactly. So, and then here we go, for the magic of doing this beforehand and not knowing how Zoom works. Stop share. We will share this one. Here is the DOR has a debt service exclusion debt service calculator, right? And I just grabbed one of our latest municipal rates. These change, but they're about 3%. So $2.2 million over 5 years, according to the capital budget kind of fiscal policies. A 5-year bond is within normal order. Like, so, you know, we might bond a fire truck, or you saw on that previous list, we bonded a 4-wheel drive loader and a dump truck, these big things. Bonding them over 5 years is kind of normal order for what we do. So if we were to bond $2.2 million and we would level the debt service payments, again, we can do that differently, but you're looking at about $528,000 so this is kind of the scope I think we should be expecting for the town hall building committee to come in the $2.5 million range, and to try to build, you know, a set of projects and some funding going forward that kind of gets everything done, gets a bunch of stuff done at once. Michelle, do you have anything to add on that front, or Susan, since you were at the most recent committee?
I'm gonna say Susan probably has more to add than I would.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly some of the drivers for getting more done faster are just logistics with town employees and other projects that are coming online and needing to prepare for the need for space for employees to come back to when, you know, because leases are rolling off or rented space for employees. So it's a combination of what makes sense for the building in terms of, like you said, rolling things out and not doing things twice. You know, the need for housing town employees, and also, you know, we have the opportunity with the nonprofit that I think you guys are all aware of, and that is, they're still very interested in pursuing that. And I think if we don't start making, you know, some motion in a direction, you know, we could lose that opportunity with the nonprofit as well. So as we're coming out, we have more documents to share. We've asked them to provide some more information, and it's trickling in, and I'll be loading it up on the OneDrive in preparation for our meeting. And that'll also include some additional sources of funds that Chris was talking about in the meeting. Some pockets of monies from some development projects, but also CPC is another area that has not yet been investigated.
So funding sources, if I'm following you correctly, are debt service is rolling off, CPC, which is
Debt
always,
service set out of a different
it's
bucket.
previously made a pledge,
Right.
it could be resurrected, correct?
Mhm.
And then what was the other one, Susan?
Well, Chris was saying there are some monies that have been held in some accounts from like the development of the Toll Brothers projects, and they may become available. And then the last one, of course, is capital stabilizations, you know,
Yeah.
taking some stuff on outside of the debt service if there were, or just making the debt service bigger.
And we're also
think in-
working with, sorry,
in
we're
terms
also,
Go ahead,
also
Michelle.
working with National Grid because there's incentives through our Green Communities grants and things like that that we can pull in towards this project.
Okay.
Right. I don't know, Michelle, you might have seen my email about, there's this project that was done in East Hampton, Massachusetts, which I find very, very interesting, and very, very much parallels what we're trying to do, but they're well into doing it. And they were also able to get some historic grants just for refurbishing, and you know, their older building. It didn't have to be on the historic register, But for utilizing an older, for taking an older building and renovating it to be reutilized, they were able to get funds.
Okay. I mean, I think
My-
the Toll Brothers, if I remember correctly, because I went through this with master plan, we've used up all the Avalon to put in place the Sawyer Street sidewalk, so that those funds are basically zero, if I'm correct. And I think the Toll Brothers may be like, correct me,
30 or
like
$40,000.
Yeah,
that
that's
much?
what Chris said.
like
It was
150,000. It's
yeah.
not much.
Yeah, that's yeah. All these other things, unless Michelle, you know, it's not. We didn't find $500,000, right?
No.
No.
This is
Well, that's what I was like.
correct. This is yeah. I like the idea of us going through the couch like we just did with capital budget, but there's
Right.
not another $300,000.
And I think we keep using the same funds for any shortfalls we have. We keep saying.
Oh
"We
yeah.
have These funds, so they can only be
Correct,
used
it's
so many
amazing.
times.
Well,
Yeah,
and
it's hard,
I
yeah.
I will tell you, because I had for Jack Creighton pull up the gift agreement for Toll Brothers, and it's very specific. So you'd be easier to transfer it to a roads and sidewalks project than you would be just to
Yeah,
transfer.
I'm just letting you know that it
Yeah.
was brought up in the meeting and
Okay.
Chris said that he needed to look at it further. but
Okay.
We were doing exactly
it.
what you guys are doing now, trying to figure
Look at it,
out
all he wants, the
where will the
numbers
money
not gonna
come
get
from.
The change in the couch strategy. Okay.
Right.
And so there's just when I first heard this, I mean, this to me, right? We've talked about FY26 just being kind of a mess right now. We've got a lot of requests. Typically we get a little bit of bump in free cash at special town meeting, and we got not even a hiccup, right? I mean, we got money, but so we're just restricted in what we could do. So getting stuff out of FY26, I like a lot. If the plan was to spend, $600,000 in the next 5 years, every year, then this would be a more efficient way to do that, right? Because every time you do the building, prices are going to go up. Getting it done in one fell swoop makes a lot of sense. It's not that the interest is going to murder us, and as long as it stays in kind of that $500,000 range, I mean, what I said previously, I think we can work with it as a matter of behavior. It obviously is money we're missing, but the thing is, and what I heard about this, what I was trying to impress on the people I was talking to is that if we take on debt, it's the first tranche of everything. We can't not pay it, right? So that it's going to bump other things at some point because we just don't have the money. So if the select board's priority number one over everything else is getting this done, okay, but it also will mean that if there's other things that need to happen to that building, those are kind of go down to the bottom of the list because we've already given it the very top of the list. So if there's $500,000, there's not another $500,000 available out of our fund for that. So I've been trying to, and I want to share this with the committee as a whole. That's always kind of been my thought on this, is like, I think it's a great idea as long as it's understood that we have the ability to do this, but it absolutely impacts our ability to do other things to the point where we really don't have the flexibility to do this doesn't create money, right? This just moves money ahead. And that's kind of, where I landed on it.
I mean, we have right now setting aside the $650,000 for town hall. We have we have 2 million in requests. And so if you add back in town hall, we're at 2.6 and the apple cart tips. So
it's not tipped, it's fallen off of Everest, right?
Well,
It's
yeah, I
in the
know,
hall somewhere.
but if you look at everything we've got,
Right.
absent town hall, that 650,000, we've got 1,995,227. So we're basically at budget
We are.
with a little bit of wiggle room, like we could go up to 2.2. So we've got 200,000 maybe in the capital budget. Stabilization
get
fund that we could put towards something.
Well, and the question would be if they issue a bond, how much money would we actually have to put towards it this fiscal year?
Right.
Probably
Mhm.
nothing or close to nothing, but having a little bit of wiggle. But the idea that we could get, I mean, pretty much to your point, Katie, everything that we've got ahead in front of us done is, would be great. Without having to kind of really cut some hard things in order for, to do town hall.
But if people want $635,000 of things done this year, that means that at least 500,000 is gonna have to come out of all the requests that we've basically heard to date. So, yeah, I mean, there's an opportunity here. I guess my question is this: we've got, in terms of departments left to hear, I think we've got DPW. And
Facilities hasn't told us everything yet.
if facilities, he could come talk about the new facility building, but I think that request has gone down to $50,000 from 200,000.
Yeah,
Still in
and you-
flux, yeah.
And the harbor master request is not going to be 26 anymore.
You're right, the harbor master is gone.
Yeah.
Yep. So the 199, the 2 million that I was referring does not include the harbor master this year. That's gone to zero. And it includes only $50,000 towards a new facilities building.
What did you include for road sidewalks and schools? Anything?
Nothing right now.
Okay, well, if you
Yeah,
got that.
again, like.
Swish, right, small
Swish.
ball, yeah.
Or it could come out of school stabilization.
So I wanted to give the update, but also, kick it back to Michelle and just keep us in the loop, deliver the message. I think we're,
I go to those meetings regularly, Corey.
oh, good. Oh, yeah. Well, Michelle gives it to Chris. So mainline it.
I mean, if we hear DPW next Monday, we will be at the point where we've heard everything absent town hall. Is there a chance that somebody could come talk to us the last Monday of February and present what the town hall thought process is for this $2.2 to $2.5 million package of upgrades?
Yes, they're prepared. They are preparing to come. I had thrown out that there may be time in the meeting on the 10th to add them to the agenda.
Yeah, I mean,
Whenever they're
But they
ready,
may not
right?
be, they may not be prepared.
I think
Okay.
they might be. I know Nick was just waiting for some quotes to come in today.
Okay.
But I think they pretty much have a roadmap at this point. They
Okay.
might not have all of the quotes, but they do have a.
Has everyone agreed on the roadmap and the size of the road? Because that's a different, the point being, like, if we want to hear it the last Monday, that gives everyone time to do this for a little longer, because I still kind of feel like we're doing this.
A good idea. So-
Unless you get a
Yeah,
different
that's fine.
indication, like, because Glenn's email was one thing, Mark's conversation was something else, and, we don't know about other things as well. It just, I feel like people have to talk about this for a little longer.
Yeah, and Susan, do you know when the next meeting is? So you'll all be on the same page? No?
They haven't announced it yet.
Okay, I will ask tomorrow.
But yeah,
Because I
let's
think
do
you'll
that.
all need
Let's
one more
try to get
meeting.
another meeting in there with them, and then
And again, recency,
it sounded at the end of the last meeting that we were sort of on the same page. But you're right, Corey. When you start to get back individual answers, they don't always line up.
Yeah, and again, last round where every meeting was a different scope and a different thing, and it was this, and we're
Yeah.
not doing this. It's just, I do not want to repeat the experience of talking about the same thing more than 17 times. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, if we can limit it to
Right.
once or twice, that'd be great.
Let's do that, Michelle.
Okay,
I'll
So the
let them
last
know that
Monday- we're gonna target the
talking
last
about
Monday.
24th of February. And give us a little more time to prepare and get everybody marching to the same plan.
So we
Yeah,
can do DPW and the road and sidewalk plan
On the
Okay.
10th.
on the
Yeah.
10th. Is sewer or water ready? Because we could get them in too on the 10th. Cause don't we have to knock that out at some point? I'd love to sort of get the procedural stuff in.
I
Do you
don't,
guys normally hear from them or how's that work?
We do.
we do,
Yeah.
We do.
we do, we usually hear from at the bitter end.
Have we
We're
gotten
not doing
anything
bitter
from them at
end
all?
anymore. We're a new committee.
Yeah,
Like,
I know, but typically it's just their retained earnings they're taking money out of.
I know,
So it doesn't affect your pool of money.
I know.
But let me regroup with them tomorrow and I'll get back to you.
All right. I just, like, if it's gonna be procedural, I'd rather do the procedural, cause it sounds like we might have some real stuff to chew on with town hall at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Yeah, I have an email into, Carl and Brian to confirm the 10th. I don't think I heard back from them yet, but, that's what they had said a month ago, work for them, so I'm holding them to it. And asking that they have everything to us by Friday end of day so we can upload it like we did for the schools.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that would be the plan.
Okay.
In terms of circling back with the schools, do people just wanna, I don't know how you've done it in the past, whether you just send questions or follow-ups to one person and that person aggregates it and sends it back, or how, or you talk about it in a next committee meeting?
I thought we've sent
Yeah,
questions
we've
for one
just done
person. right?
questions, yeah.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we send school questions to me and Corey and I will aggregate them and we'll go back to them with a consolidated list.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've got the yeah. I've got a whole list of notes. So yeah, Katie, we'll connect and draft an
Yeah.
email tomorrow
Yeah.
or Wednesday.
All
All right, longest meeting of the cycle. Nice job, everybody.
Yeah,
There was a lot there. I mean, I know that
Lot
we
of
helped Greg
material.
up, but it was, $500,000 worth of stuff or even more. So I think that was as efficient as we really could have been.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's funny, like I'm so used to like meetings going long that didn't even strike me as a long meeting.
No, that didn't seem bad at all. Right. We spent longer over $10,000 than we did over $500,000.
Exactly. I thought we were doing pretty well. And then I
Me
was like,
too.
oh shit, I guess we're not. And so
Yeah.
anyway, no, anyway, when you send through questions, if there's feedback for next year, I do think that hopefully it was a bit smoother and we'll keep on working it.
And just finally check in with Chris. It seems like you're taking a lot of notes this time around. How are you getting your feet under you? How are you doing? You're muted.
You muted.
Muted.
Okay.
I have one other question, Michelle, not to be a loaded one, but 135 King Street. Is that gonna be on our list for FY26 or is there a zinger coming?
Oh,
with-
no, yes.
You have to unmute to answer this
Yeah,
one.
Maybe she doesn't
so
want
let's
to.
see, we are going out to bid. We will have bids back in July. We're gonna have a special town meeting the first week in October.
So nothing for FY26, so we don't need to know anything now. Okay.
No,
Okay.
no, because we'll get the project started with the funding we have. No, we'll be
All
fine.
right.
Okay, so 135 King Street is maybe a special town meeting conversation.
Oh, it's definitely a special town meeting conversation, and we believe it's October the 6th. Let me look.
Oh my God. That's
Any day
early.
in October.
October, I think it's October 6th.
Okay. So we'll have 135 King Street and then we'll also have the MASB and Osgood roof for the fall. Okay.
And 62 Elm Street.
Oh, yeah.
They're kind of like a package deal.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So we don't have to jam that in this spring is
No.
what.
No.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So it's down to town hall as our wild card so far.
Isn't it always?
Is there another Joker in the deck? I don't know.
Groundhog, it's like Groundhog Day. at Town Hall.
Exactly.
Wild.
Will we see our shadow?
I saw something that the Pennsylvania groundhog is right only 35% of the time, but there's a groundhog on Staten Island that's right 65% of the time. So, like,
Give him
think it's like-
Punxsutawney a run for his money, huh?
yeah, it was a Staten Island Chuck. He's your better bet in terms of like,
I want to see that conversation between the the Pennsylvania people and Staten Island people. It'd be
exactly.
worth recording, broadcasting on Instagram.
I'd like to see the Las Vegas odds on that one.
Yeah, totally.
We're not betting against Staten Island anything. So,
Okay.
Okay, so there are no minutes, so we don't have to, that agenda item is,
Yeah.
so I guess the only item left on the agenda is adjourning,
so moved.
okay?
Second.
9:19 PM,
All right.
roll call,
All in favor, Katie Dugan.
Corey Evans, aye.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Chris Fleisch, aye.
Susan Franklin, I
Thank you
don't
all.
know if Rob is here.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, good night, guys.
Good night.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.